One more step and Jacksonville's plans to rebuild the stadium downtown and keep the Jaguars for another 30 years will be locked down.
Really, we want a no-compromise stadium, but bang for the buck, okay?
Jaguars leadership and the mayor talk about the negotiations, the deal, and the impact they hope to see. It's also been an historic week because of presidential politics. The former president and the current president on stage battling about the direction of the country. Chris Hand joins us to talk about both big topics on This Week in Jacksonville. And so glad you're with us today. Chris Hand with us as well. These two major topics, and we're going to get to the presidential debate from this week as we go on in our show. First, we're discussing this massive Stadium of the Future deal in Jacksonville. Before we hear from some of the key players, Chris, what's your immediate takeaway from this? Obviously, a months-long process, but finally City Council voting yes this week.
Well, Ken, this is probably the biggest moment in the history between the city of Jacksonville and the Jacksonville Jaguars since the team was first awarded in November of 1993. What this does is the city's making a major investment to renovate the stadium, and as part of that, the Jaguars are committing to a new 30-year lease on the stadium as well. So what it looks like, there's been speculation over time, will the Jaguars stay in Jacksonville,
right,
where they go somewhere else? Everyone now making a commitment that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be playing NFL football right here in Northeast Florida.
Yeah, and something in visiting with Shad Khan this week outside the stadium at the Miller Electric Center. Something he said, somebody brought up, hey, do you think people finally understand that you're going to stay? And he basically said, what else can I do? So the day after City Council voted 14-1 in favor of the stadium deal, we got to talk with the mayor, Donna Deegan, and Jaguars owner Shad Khan. Sports anchor Jamal St. Cyr joined me at the Miller Electric Center for this conversation. So the next and maybe final step in getting the deal approved will come in October at the NFL owners meeting.
You have 32 owners, there are 32 opinions, okay? Right. So I think it's like, so we have to go with what we think works for us and then solicit support for that. And that's really how things work.
I think, too, the other thing is that I think the Jaguars had seen some of the challenges with the initial lease where they didn't have so much control over certain things about maintaining the stadium and making sure the stadium was, and this is not an indictment of anybody, but cities aren't great at maintaining their own facilities. And so that was one of the points in which we really were able to very quickly come to consensus, because the Jaguars wanted more control over that process, so that they made sure that remained a state-of-the-art space to make sure the fans had a great experience. And of course we want that, because we want to be able to not only enjoy these wonderful NFL games, but to attract good concerts and all the other wonderful things that come with having a world-class facility like this. So there were some things that just made sense. But I think, again, that if you look at other agreements out there and you look at ours, I think you really see evidence here of a true partnership. And I think that's what we all really wanted to come to, where we came away from the table feeling that we had a true partnership. Yeah. And honestly, we wanted to keep our NFL team. They didn't really have to do that, but they did, because they wanted what was best for the city, and I think that speaks volumes.
And speaking of what's best for the city, you mentioned that early on in the process, wanting this deal to be about more than just a stadium, but something that the entire community can benefit from. The community benefits plan kind of separated from this. How confident are you that you'll be able to get that across the finish line? And how beneficial will that be for the community if it does?
Well, I'm very confident. Look, I think having this stadium completed is a huge benefit for the community. But in terms of those needs, those things, those pressure points that keep us from being the great city that we can be, things like affordable housing, our homelessness issues, our workforce development issues. We all know we need more workforce in Jacksonville. Think about all the projects we have going on now that are going to be going on for the next several years. We need to develop the workforce. That's important. The historic East Side is the neighbor to the stadium. We need that community to be successful. So I think it all makes sense. It's also the right thing to do. And I really believe that when council gets back in July, we're going to get that across the finish line.
So both both of you in the news conference earlier talked at the signing ceremony, talked about, okay, we did it again on the promotional material, if you will. But it's also, you're saying, hey, don't doubt Jacksonville. Do you feel like maybe this is that inflection point?
Better correct him, Sean.
Do you feel like this?
Never doubt.
Do you feel like this is that inflection point too? Because having an NFL team can boost some esteem for city residents, but is this where you take that next step, City of Jacksonville?
I think, again, actions speak louder than words, and I think there are a lot of actions here. And so to me, what's really important is, we put it to greater good, and people are going to do whatever they're going to do, okay? I mean, I remember a couple of years ago how many times, well, some of your colleagues would say there'll never be a Four Seasons in Jacksonville. Okay, wasn't that kind of ridiculous? And now that you look back at it, heck, their flagship, I've owned it for 8 years. They're out of Toronto, okay? And so it was like, I don't even want to get into a debate because it's such a ridiculous thing. And how many tweeting went on? I have friends in commercial real estate. They say it'll never happen. I mean, when you have a lot of that, and really that's noise you have to ignore. I think what we have to do is work with the city, work with the communities, and keep moving forward. I'm hoping it's just, I'd used, 10 years ago, whatever, that Mojo example, okay, that was very uncomfortable for a lot of people, but I just that's before I got a course in PR. So the mayor said it about the issue of, local self-confidence. I mean, this should be boosting it up, and then eventually, the vision the mayor's had, I think, north side of the river with the parks, with the stadium, with the Four Seasons, on and on and on. I think it's going to speak for itself, and it's going to result in, little self-esteem, so, and I run into people from Jacksonville all over the world, we're just walking on a street, and I mean, they have a huge amount of pride. I'm there, which is awesome, but, we want to see it in action now, so.
And at the signing, you talked a little bit about the architecture of the stadium, saying that was kind of maybe your nighttime hobby. How involved were you in the designing of some of the renderings, maybe tinkers here or there?
A lot, okay? So I think, the process was we had all these, I've been to a bunch of venues, and really we want a no-compromise stadium, but bang for the buck. Okay, and so it shouldn't be, and there are many examples. I mean, we accomplished, it's a great, comfortable environment, ecologically friendly, responsible, aesthetically pleasing. You look at an image of it, you look at the Eiffel Tower, where you are. You look at this image, where you are. So I think, a lot of those came together over the last 5 years.
Final question. You mentioned, staying optimistic, and that from the beginning of owning the Jaguars, so we got to find a way to make it sustainable. So third mayoral administration you've worked with here in Jacksonville, have you accomplished that goal to make the Jaguars sustainable for the long term? And how did you stay optimistic when other projects, Lot J, whatever, didn't work out?
Yeah, because I've had a lot of failure in my life, okay? So, I mean, I had a life before, here with the Jaguars, and a lot of that wasn't on the sports pages, it wasn't in the newspapers, okay? So, you're kind of used to it. It's like football. You get up, you dust yourself off, you get ready for the next play, okay? And you can't worry too much about that.
All right, we're diving deeper into the stadium deal, the details of the community benefit agreement as well. And we're also going to start breaking down the historic and consequential debate between President Biden and former President Trump. Chris Hand stays with us on This Week in Jacksonville. Don't go anywhere.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
Chris Hand is with us, government law attorney, our monthly Hand on Government show that we do. And we're talking about this Jaguar Stadium deal. One of the things that was important to the mayor and to the Jaguars, say, hey, we've got a community benefits agreement, some $300 million that was in there. Only a portion of that made it through City Council for various reasons. What's your feedback on that, your view?
Kent, community benefit agreements have become sort of a standard part of new Jaguar Stadium deals. You know, Buffalo is building a new stadium in Tennessee where the Titans play. So it's become part of the deal. This was a big priority for Mayor Deegan, who said that this was really, in her mind, the most important part of the deal. The community benefits agreement, as originally formulated, Kent, was going to involve the city putting in $150 million, the Jaguars also putting in $150 million, the city's share all at once, the Jaguars about $5 million a year for the 30-year life of the lease. And it was designed to fund a variety of projects, riverfront parks, to finish those parks they've started in downtown Jacksonville, also to help invest in out east, the east side community that's adjacent to the stadium, and also invest in some community-wide priorities like affordable housing, fighting homelessness, dealing with workforce development. Well, what happened, and of course, whenever a mayor proposes something and the council disposes, there are always going to be changes in that process, and the stadium deal was no different. So what ended up happening was about $56 million of the community benefit agreement, the part dedicated to riverfront parks, that was passed by the Jacksonville City Council last week. The other $94 million for those other priorities we talked about, that was deferred to the budget process. Council President Ron Salem, other members said that they wanted to be able to look at that funding consistent with the other city funding obligations that it might have during the budget and decide best what to do with that. So at this point, the community benefits agreement is an incomplete process. City Council will take that up again in July.
The mayor, Shad Khan, they held this signing ceremony on Wednesday after council voted 14-1 in favor of this agreement on Tuesday night. The money spent here, the money committed, Jacksonville's portion, more than $775 million over this process. The mayor says that's not going to take away from other priorities that the city has. How does that happen from an administration standpoint?
Well, there's no question it's a significant financial investment. I mean, stadiums are not inexpensive, and we've seen this in places around the country. The other, particularity here is that unlike other states which do contribute funding to stadium projects, Florida does not. So in terms of public financing, City of Jacksonville was totally on its own. And look, it is still a significant investment of up to almost $800 million. And if you include the community benefits agreement, you're getting closer to $900 million at that point. So there's no question it's a very significant financial investment. A lot of that money is borrowed money, so the city will end up paying debt service on that. But I think one of the things you'll see, Kent, as we transition into budget season, and the mayor is required to propose her annual budget to the council by July the 15th, is the city council starting to look at a variety of these expenses and how they work together. Not just the stadium, but also the prospect of building a new Duval County jail, which should cost $1 billion. As you know, it's recently been announced a tentative agreement between the city and both the police union and the firefighters union to give 22% raises over the next 3 years and allow them admission into the Florida retirement system. Those are steps with significant fiscal impact. There's a lot of investment proposed for downtown. So and you're seeing around the country revenues shrinking for cities, some cities beginning to run deficits. So I think we're about to enter into here in Jacksonville, Kent, a long-term financial discussion. How does the city manage all of these financial priorities, not just the stadium?
Yeah. All right, thank you, Chris. And so we're going to change focus after a short commercial break here. The big national story, the first of two debates in the race for the White House. Chris and I break down what happened and how it may affect the election. Stay with us for more on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
Chris Hand is with us. So Chris, part of our panel of political analysts that was together on debate night. This was one of the big stories this week, and in this election, this has been maybe the biggest story so far. What did you take away from what we saw on Thursday night, the CNN presidential debate between former President Donald Trump and sitting President Joe Biden?
Well, Ken, this was the first time, remember, that every election is a choice. It comes down to a finite number of candidates from whom voters have to choose. This was the first time that we saw President Biden and former President Trump side by side on the debate stage. And we normally don't see presidential candidates debating this early in a general election. Neither has even been officially nominated by their parties yet. June 27th, the earliest possible debate. I think part of the rationale for this early debate is particularly the Biden campaign was looking for an opportunity to help sort of change the narrative, maybe shake up the race a little bit. For really the last several months, former President Trump has had a small but persistent lead, both nationally and in some of these swing states. So I think part of the goal was to have an early debate to try and change those perceptions a little bit. I think there were a variety of takeaways from the debate itself. One is, one of President Biden's strategic imperatives was to come in and channel his March State of the Union address, be energetic, be feisty, have command of the issues, be knowledgeable. Unfortunately for the president, I don't think he met that standard. That various times in the debate did not seem to be able to engage quite as strongly as I think he and his team would have liked him to do. So as a result, former President Trump, of the two candidates, is the one that seemed to bring more energy, some more knowledge, some more, kind of conviction on the issues than former President Biden. So from that standpoint, the president's strategic imperative to show that energy, to address concerns voters might have about his age or his capacity to do the job, Biden campaign probably did not accomplish their goals of the debate last night.
A lot of conversation after the debate for where do they go from here? There's talk that, well, maybe President Biden isn't going to be nominated or ultimately isn't going to be the person that Democrats support as being president when we get to November. That would be unprecedented.
Well, Kent, one of the challenges with the situation, the president is the oldest person ever to serve in office. He's 81 years old. He'd be 82 before he would begin a second term. He would be 86 at the time he ends a second term. Obviously, that hasn't happened before in the country. So it puts kind of a higher burden and a higher focus on what is the president's energy, his physical and mental ability to do the job, and really raises the stakes of an event last night. So because the president did not give a strong performance like maybe he did when he was running for vice president or when he was running for president 4 years ago, that has caused some concern around the country. Is he the best candidate that the Democrats can nominate? He's not been formally nominated yet. That takes place at the Democratic National Convention. However, he has won the required number of delegates to be nominated. So at this point, for the nominee to be anyone other than Joe Biden, that would have to be Joe Biden's decision to withdraw from the race, at which point the Democrats could nominate a new candidate at their August convention. As you say, that's never happened before. The closest time that's happened in American history was on March 31st, 1968, when Lyndon Johnson announced that he would not run again. But at that point, there were still Democratic primaries going on, and Vice President Hubert Humphrey and Senator Robert Kennedy, Senator Eugene McCarthy could all still compete for the nomination. At this point, those primaries are done. It would be a decision left up totally to those Democratic delegates.
Yeah. So what do we think happens now, and how does this play out for some of the undecided voters, the folks who were watching the debate this week saying, maybe it'll help me figure out which one of these candidates I want to support?
Well, look, I think that's going to be a key issue to track in the days to come. It's very legitimate to have reactions on debate night or even the next day, but particularly important to see how it develops over the next few days and how does the race turn. Because this contest is so close, Kent, and because it comes down to about 7 or 8 swing states here in the country, there's a very small sliver of voters who are going to decide this election. Many of them are independents or so-called no-party affiliation voters. Others, and this is a new term that's been coined this year, are the so-called double hater voters, people who do not want either former President Trump or former President Biden. I think one of the takeaways we'll see from last night is that the landscape probably hasn't changed much for those double hater voters. Many of them are skeptical about former President Trump because they're concerned about his relationship to the truth, his felony conviction that recently happened in a New York court, the way he kind of engages with political opponents. Some of those traits that they don't like, they probably saw on stage last night. For those voters that were also concerned about President Biden and about age and kind of, his ability to kind of handle the office, probably they were not reassured on that front as well last night. So we'll have to see in some of the polling and other research that's done where those double hater voters are. But those would be the two groups of voters that I'm going to be tracking most closely. How does this affect independents? How does it affect the voters who don't want either of the current choices being offered to them? Because again, every election is a choice.
So hour and a half for the debate. Obviously, the questions were on issues that people in the country say, these are really important to me. We had no idea we'd hear these two presidents talking about their golf game. That was out of the blue, and I think a lot of people are saying, what relevance is there? Maybe that's part of the conversation, that it really wasn't relevant, but an indicator of how things just kind of got off the rails a little bit.
Yeah, that part of the debate, Kent, not to stretch this analogy too far, was a little bit like hitting into the sand trap in the sense that that really has very little relevance.
Hurts your handicap.
Yeah, right, exactly. Doesn't have a lot of relevance to the everyday lives of Americans. What I was surprised about is they spent about as much time talking about their golf handicaps as they did about the crucial economic issue of inflation and how each of the presidential candidates are going to address that, and a variety of other issues as well. So that sometimes can happen in these presidential debates. They take on a life of their own, and you're an experienced debate moderator. You know how these dynamics can sometimes be different. But I think it puts even more pressure on the next debate. Part of the challenge for Joe Biden here is, look, there are a variety of presidents running for second terms who have had challenges in their first debates. Ronald Reagan did in 1984. Barack Obama did in 2012. George W. Bush did in 2004. It happens. The difference is those presidents had debates coming up very shortly where they could rebound from that performance. The next debate in this race is September the 10th. Okay, so more than 2 months away.
We're going to have to wrap it up, but I love talking about all of these things with you, Chris. Thank you so much for your time. And This Week in Jacksonville airs every Sunday morning at 9. Outgoing City Council President Ron Salem and the incoming President Randy White. We have each of them with us next time. I'm Kent Justice. Thanks for watching on air on Channel 4, the CW17, and online at news4jax.com.
See why every day more people are choosing News 4 Jax, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.